Morning, and thank you all for joining us here today. I'm Frances Coppolillo, and I'm the Deputy Chief Executive Officer and Head of Programs for NMIT and its Paran campus, Melbourne Polytechnic. On behalf of the Institute, I would like to extend a warm welcome here today to the Victorian Premier, the Honourable Dr. Denis Napthine, the Minister for Higher Education and Skills, the Honourable Nick Wakeling, the Member for Paran, Mr. Clem Newton-Brown, and the Member for Southern Metropolitan Region, Ms. Georgie Crozier, and the candidate for Preston, Mr. John Forster. Before we commence proceedings this morning, I'd like to ask that your mobile phones and electronic devices are either switched off or moved to silent mode. Thank you. I'd now like to introduce the Premier, Dr. Denis Napthine, for today's special announcement regarding the future of NMIT and Melbourne Polytechnic. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much for that very, very warm introduction. Could I acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to elders past and present? Could I acknowledge Nick Wakeling, the Minister for Higher Education and Skills, and saying what a great job Nick's doing in this very important role. Clem Newton-Brown as the local member for Paran, but also as Parliamentary Secretary for Education. Georgie Crozier as the local upper house member here, and Georgie does a terrific job representing this broader community. John Gibbons, the Chair of NMIT. Ron Gorshi, I'm going to get this wrong because, see, I'm a Minister for Racing, and every time I see that name I think of Darren Gauci. And when people pronounce it differently, I have great difficulty. So, Ron, but it's great to have you as Interim CEO. And Frances, thank you very, very much for that very warm introduction. We know that NMIT has had a long history as a major provider of skills, vocational education and training across its 9 campuses, particularly in northern metropolitan area, but also in Kyneton and Ararat, and certainly is well known in the vocational education and training industry. And that's to the great credit of the many staff that are here today and the history of NMIT over a number of years. In 2008, the former Labor government introduced some changes to vocational education and training in Victoria to provide a more open, more competitive system. We as a government, we endorsed and supported those changes. We believe in choice. We believe in providing students with the opportunity to choose their provider, choose their courses, and that new, more open, more competitive system will provide a more dynamic, a more innovative vocational education and training system, a better skills training system for its servants and also particularly for its students, which provides better outcomes for the economy in Victoria. So having more choice for students has created some challenges and opportunities for traditional providers and created greater competition with many other new entrants into the system. So there's no doubt that there has been some challenges and opportunities in vocational education and training since 2008, since those major changes. The coalition government, since we've been in office, has responded very positively to those challenges and those opportunities. We've increased funding for vocational education and training, for skills training across Victoria from $800 million a year to $1.2 billion a year, and we're committed to spending at least $1.2 billion a year over the next 4 years of the forward estimates. In that time, we've seen enrolments increase from 2010 of 426,900 to 645,000. So we've seen a 50% increase in funding for skills training in Victoria and a 51% increase in enrolments. So that's the system responding positively to the needs of people across Victoria, whether they be young people, whether they be more mature age people seeking to change careers or change their lives, and people who are doing courses to enhance their personal lifestyle and their personal education. We've seen significant increase in participation from groups within society that we actually want to encourage into vocational education and training. We've seen a massive increase in people who are unemployed doing skills training across Victoria. We've seen a significant increase in the number of people from culturally and linguistically diverse groups across Victoria participating in vocational education training. We're seeing a significant increase in people from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities participating in vocational education and training. And I'm pleased, coming from regional Victoria, that we've also seen a significant increase in the number of people in regional and rural Victoria who are enrolled and participated in vocational education and training. At the same time, we've seen a significant increase in the number of people doing courses which are deemed to be areas of workforce demand, an increase from 49% of people in vocational education and training doing courses that will equip them with skills for jobs that are available in the community to now over 72%. And we believe that's a really positive outcome of these changes. The other significant change that each of you in this room would be very, very aware of is the change in the way we provide vocational education and training. And indeed, recently I was at Southwest TAFE in my own backyard, and we were providing some additional funding for Southwest TAFE. And one of the slogans they were using in terms of what they were going to use the money for was to make sure that they could provide any course, anywhere, anytime, on any device. And we're certainly seeing it more and more. And I can think in my own area, in our dairy industry, which is one of the areas that is benefiting from increased Asian engagement and opportunities in China, where people who previously were unable to do vocational education and training and unable to advance their skills because of the requirement of their 24/7 work requirements on the farm, are now doing courses on the farm using devices and actually doing some of the work while the cows are being milked. And you can use those examples across the whole workforce area where we're changing the way we think about skills training, changing the way we deliver vocational education and training. And just recently we've announced the contracts for the East-West Link Stage 1. And we can already see, I was at East-West Connect this morning talking to the people who are delivering that project, and they're talking about the 3,700 people who will be working on that project. There'll be over 10,000 people will actually be registered to go onto the site, and thousands more off-site supplying the goods and services. And they're talking about the skills and the skills training those people will need. And those skills, many of them will be delivered on-site. They'll be delivered while people are working rather than in a more traditional classroom model. So these changes have certainly provided great opportunities and also, we understand, great challenges, particularly for traditional vocational education and training providers. And that's why when I became Premier in March last year, one of the first announcements that I made was a $200 million structural adjustment fund for many of our traditional TAFE providers to access into, to help those traditional TAFE providers to rethink how they deliver their skills training, their vocational education and training in this more competitive environment, in this more dynamic environment, in this more anywhere, anytime environment for vocational education and training. And I'm pleased to announce today that from that fund, we are able to provide through the Minister today $19 million for NMIT to actually help NMIT to undergo these changes, to make NMIT, which has got a long and proud history, a stronger institution, a stronger provider of skills training, vocational education and training, to make NMIT stronger, more responsive and more flexible to meet the needs of the students of 2014 and beyond. So students will seek out the courses that you provide because you are providing courses that are relevant to their skills training needs. You are providing them in a way that those students want them and in a flexible manner that meets those needs. So it's about flexibility, responsiveness and innovation. And I'm also pleased to be here today to be involved in the change that NMIT is making to better reflect this new approach, and to announce that NMIT will have a new name, a new identity, a bright new future, building on the past but putting forward a very positive, innovative way forward that says to the whole of Victoria and indeed Australia and the world, because more and more NMIT, or under its new name, will be seen as a local, a regional, a statewide, an Australia-wide and an international area of expertise and skill in providing skills training, in providing vocational education and training. And I'm very pleased and thrilled that NMIT will be operating under the name Melbourne Polytechnic. And I think that name evokes a 21st century approach to skills training, a 21st century approach to vocational education and training, a 21st century responsiveness to the needs of the modern world, to the needs of modern students, be they a 16-year-old student who's left school or even still in school, an 18 or 19-year-old student who is looking to develop their skills and training for their first career, or somebody who's 35 or 40 seeking to change their careers, or somebody who's 70 or 80 seeking to enhance their skills for their personal lifestyle, or even to continue their work in a different way. So I think Melbourne Polytechnic is a great name for a dynamic institute that really is delivering 21st century skills training, vocational education and training, and we as a government are pleased to work with Melbourne Polytechnic, pleased to provide $19 million up front to help Melbourne Polytechnic transfer into this new, modern, flexible, responsive 21st century skills and vocational education training, building on its great history, building on its great achievements, building on its great performance, and transforming that into a Melbourne Polytechnic that becomes an absolute leader, not just in Victoria, but also across Australia, across the Asia Pacific and the world, as a centre of excellence for skills training, for vocational education and training, and I wish you well into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Premier. I'd now like to introduce the Minister for Higher Education Skills, the Honourable Nick Wakeling.
Well, thank you very much, and it's a great pleasure to be here today for this wonderful announcement. Can I acknowledge the presence of the Premier, Dr Dennis Snapthine, to my parliamentary colleagues, Clem Newton-Brown, my parliamentary secretary, and to Georgie Crozier. Can I acknowledge John Gibbons, the chair of the board, and to Ron Gorsey, the interim CEO. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to be here today to mark the beginning of an exciting new chapter for this institute. NMIT has a proud history of meeting Victoria's training needs, particularly in the northern region of Melbourne. And today's announcement of a new name and the business transformation plan will see Melbourne Polytechnic strengthen the training it provides to students while setting it on a path to expand its training offerings across Melbourne and, as the Premier mentioned, across the world. Now, this transformation plan that this government is very proud to provide the funding assistance of $19 million will help the Institute to align its courses, its programs and delivery modes. It will importantly enhance pathways and partnerships with industry and with the higher education sector, and the capacity for students to transition from a vocational education setting to a higher education setting is so significant. It's going to improve the student experience from initial inquiry through the enrolments and on-campus experience. And it will also improve the systems, particularly technology, which the Premier alluded to earlier, across the Institute. This $19 million funding assistance out of a $200 million TAFE structural adjustment fund is going to provide the necessary assistance to help this institute to transform into the 21st century. The government has provided record levels of training subsidies, and the TAFE Structural Adjustment Fund demonstrates this government's commitment to TAFEs as an integral part of the wider vocational sector. As the Premier has mentioned, this government is investing $1.2 billion per year, and the TAFE sector is a significant factor in the delivery of those important vocational training. And as a result of this investment, we've seen a 44% increase in student enrolments between 2010 and mid-2014. But across the nation, we now have the highest participation rate in training in the country. Victoria now has 16.1% of adults participating in training, compared to just under 12% across the nation. And as the Premier has mentioned, we now see, importantly, 72% of our enrolments in areas where we know there are employment needs. And that's exactly what this government is doing, investing more money, training more students, but more importantly, training students in areas where we know there are skill shortages. As the Premier mentioned, the former government introduced the contestable market, and we understand the challenges that TAFEs faced in dealing with those challenges. And NMIT, once the primary principal provider of training in the northern suburbs of Melbourne, as a consequence of those changes, now have 187 competitors. And as a consequence of that, this government has been working with NMIT to ensure it's better placed, it's best placed to meet the challenges, to provide the educational needs for people in Melbourne. So I'm delighted to see that our $90 million investment will support the Institute to evolve into a modern training facility that's going to meet the training needs of Victorians. As the Premier has also mentioned, the training that Melbourne Polytechnic will provide will skill the workforce needs to deliver on important infrastructure programs such as the recently announced Stage 1 of East-West Link, which was signed just this week. Can I just take this opportunity to congratulate John Gibbons as the Chair and to Ron Gorsey as the Interim CEO for the work that you've done in delivering on this vision of Melbourne Polytechnic. Can I take this opportunity to congratulate the staff who've done such wonderful work and will continue to do so into the future. And can I also take this opportunity to congratulate the students, because that's why we all do this. We do this as a government, we do it as an institution to provide educational opportunities for our students. I wish you all the best on your next stage in your important journey, and congratulations to all involved.
Thank you, Minister. Could I now invite the Premier, Napthine, the Honourable Nick Wakeling, Mr John Gibbons, Chair of Melbourne Polytechnic, and our Interim CEO, Mr Ron Gorsey, to unveil our Melbourne Polytechnic brand. So if you'd like to just...
And you know your logo.
Could I just say there is a photo opportunity now if people did want to... I think so, yes. Is that right too? Yeah.
This side. Yeah, we'll go this side.
Thank you, Premier. Thank you, Minister Wakeling, Mr Gibbons and Mr Gorsey. I would like now to introduce Melbourne Polytechnic's Interim CEO, Mr Ron Gorsey.
Thanks, Francis. Premier, Minister, distinguished guests, the board, staff, students, thank you very much for attending this morning. Earlier this year, NMIT was on the brink. We had posted a $31.7 million loss in 2013, and all the trends were that we were going to repeat that result in 2014. And this had everything to do with our failure to respond to the contestability of the marketplace and how we had fallen behind in being competitive. Today's exciting announcement has everything to do with the path we've taken to secure this institute's future, to transform it and realise its full potential. This institute became resolute in the need for transformation to make sure that we did have a secure future. After all, we have a 100-year history. This government stepped up to the plate when we asked for support and assistance, not just in this TSAF funding submission, but in providing a $16 million interest-free facility to enable us to continue our operations while we rebuilt the organisation. And that saved us from what appeared to be the inevitable. Our recovery has been remarkable. I want to say, as an interim CEO who arrived in March, I've only been here a short period of time, but I am so proud of what we as staff and institute has achieved in that short period of time. We are already now well ahead of our revised targets and our ultimate objectives. In September, we posted a profit. This institute is well on the way to achieving its transformation objectives, and yet we are still yet to draw on the facility that was made available to us. We were then given the opportunity to submit our business plans and our business cases to access the structural adjustment funds. And this announcement today of access to that $19 million allows us then to continue this transformation. Our objectives when we submitted for funding were very, very clear. We wanted to become a contemporary institute, providing an even higher level of dual sector quality education and student experiences in a financially viable and sustainable way, enabling our people, our resources, processes and systems to become more innovative, efficient and effective, and as you've heard, responsive to the market. The announcement you've heard today is substantial in many ways. It's a vote of confidence in that transformation agenda. The funding we've been successful in securing will enable us to, as you've already heard, become innovative, flexible, competitive. It enables us to restructure the organisation to a more efficient, effective and enable our staff to be far more productive. We can implement more advanced systems and processes that enable us to better manage our business and make better decisions with the right information. It's not just about the brand, but being united under a single brand and single banner is also significant. And it delivers a message of not only our role here in Victoria, but as stated, on a global stage. It puts Melbourne on the map of where global education is heading in the polytechnic space. And as Melbourne Polytechnic, we will own that space. We will rule that world. The use of our assets becomes, we have the ability now to make sure that we are far more effective in our use and productivity and returns from those assets to provide quality education, regardless of demographic, regardless of geography, regardless of mode of delivery. So ultimately, These initiatives are significantly designed to provide the very best student experience and enhanced academic learning environment possible. Therefore, the support we have received from this government has not only enabled us to covet our history, but protect and create a new future. It reveals itself with a new institute-wide single brand name and a logo of Melbourne Polytechnic, but it's underpinned by a significant investment in the infrastructure required to enable us to achieve our objectives. It represents the new model of what education is about today, crossing the blended vocational and higher education learning sectors, regardless, as I say, of geography, mode of delivery or demographic. It's about giving students the best opportunity to develop those skills that best equips them to go out and rule their world. That is the Melbourne Polytechnic mantra. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Gorsey. Once again, I'd like to thank Premier Napthine, Minister Wakeling, Ms Crozier, Mr Newton-Brown for joining us today on this auspicious occasion for the future of Melbourne Polytechnic. This concludes today's official proceedings. Please join us, though, in the David Williamson Theatre foyer for refreshments. The media doorstop will take place outside the David Williamson Theatre. Thank you very much.